says that indicates when we meet. Today it's 9 o'clock, and it's always going to be 9 o'clock. And I also see Dusty's name on here, and Eileen, who's going to give us our cultural reverence. Now, I have the agenda up. I'll call the meeting to order, and thank you guys for coming. And thank you guys for attending and the things that you do for your students. I really appreciate what you do. I think this is, I've always said this, the job that you guys have is not easy. If it was easy, everybody could do it. I think you guys reach out to the families, communities, schools, teachers, administration, and most important is the students. You get set that program for your students. When you set that program for your students, it gives them a place, a place around the table, because these students that you're teaching, they're our future. And I think the more information that we give our students and support them, they do a lot better. And I think the other part is that you guys are not alone in this. You have your fellow Title VI coordinators, as well as some of the family members, as well as the school districts, because I think the more you're exposing yourself to the school district and the teachers, this goes a long ways. Because oftentimes that we do have teachers that are unaware that they do have American Indian students, Alaska Native students in their classes, and once you show some interest for that student, you find that these teachers will gravitate to that part. So appreciate what you guys do. We have the cultural reverence, which I'm gonna give the floor to Eileen and then we go to number 3, Dustin. Of course, he's going to be doing our uh, professional development, and we'll skip down to the updates, the Urban Indian Center, and then we'll adjourn until February 13th. So let's start with the cultural reverence by Eileen, and go ahead, Eileen. You can do
I
your
hope
cultural reverence.
I can get this done before they do the announcement. So I'm going to try and hurry. Um, I'm going
Go ahead
to
and
offer.
take your time. This is your time. I think this is appropriate because I think this is really important. When we have cultural reverence, we never hurry. It's always we find our place, we find our time in that place. So that's yeah. So just take your time.
Okay. I'm going to start with my prayer first, and then I will maybe reflect and talk a little bit afterwards if I have time. They do an announcement here at my school, and it's over the intercom, so I might have to cut it short. It's just a warning. Okay, I'm going to say it in my own language and then translate it. Now, Sash Maya the Hilsha di Shakushogo di Quad, Yat Eho di Quaki Hasitlin, which Shogo di Katnachan, Bandahuit, do Quad, Del Nisho, Balside Kiesko, Adole, Balch Adon Nichtanitsino, Atlanetle, di the Quad Utah will yeni. No Kati and the Netanetle, the Nitleniki di Con. Nakaakweliado nakatropa ye nakaalchin di kwade kinasta oltka la bitin da we nago la chian de be den la dat loko la ndelse baka neja hodiat eo ben nasna da init esto do di ko madota bjekin juno bje yadaltiko she we she yeshta but niko yuta but niko di ko de biyaho ato it aban sidi kesko bata wilya din hesto yat eo ko de danitle ko halot ko halot hina gun juno zindasnel na khata wilya do di Nihedo zastanitsen tko bohoye shinko be daike tan link on jono tko tan link hita etano selto di and hitbe ko di lehti tko tan itsiniki to na hina ne shilto pa ko liati hut avans bana no shkako dishne ich het din Ian het a chwillo na nes ni chid da hallo ni nago o chyu go da hallo go ba het an ilsen di wit aban an Chicago dishne di wit aban but citizen vision hastling you know I'm gonna say that in my prayer I asked for blessings and thankfulness to the things around us, for the mountains that surround us, that protect us from the wind, that protect us with food. My mom, when she was alive, she would point to the mountains and say, the la was only zilpakaki, yan hullo, at setbe da she would say, look at the mountains. There's food all over that mountain. There's it's loaded down with meat. And what she was referring to is our people would go up into these places where the elk, the deer were, and they would hunt and bring back food for their families. And she would always remind me of that. And in my prayer, I also asked, made acknowledgement that our main work here is our youth, our children, to be able to be sustainable. We wouldn't be able to do it without our little ones to carry forward the work that we are doing today. It's them that brings us hope, that brings us joy, that brings us all the good things that you can imagine. We all do everything for them. Why do we work? We work to put um, a roof over their heads, heat, food, everything that we can imagine to sustain life. We do it for them. And we need to keep that in mind. Our world is going through hard times, but we have these precious little ones that are depending on us to be able to set a solid foundation for them to continue in this world. And I asked also that the holy ones bless us with moisture. We've been waiting a long time for snow. We need moisture to be able to grow our gardens, to be able to fill the rivers better so that we can sustain life down here in the valley. We live in a desert. So we're praying for snow so that it can accumulate on the mountaintops to be able to sustain life for all of us here. I also asked for the children, a lot of them we see as our work. A lot of them come in hungry. We see a lot of them come in without coats. And this, is very heart wrenching. I'm very fortunate that I have partners that bring in coats, that I write a grant that brings in coats for my little ones. So when I see that happening, I can reach out to them and give them a food box, a coat to have, gloves and scarf and mittens and all that. And running strong for American Indian Youth is the grant that I write to be able to make that possible. But reaching the heart of these little ones is the key. The more interaction directly, when you can see them, touch them, and be around them and visit them, that's the key to teaching. And so I really encourage all of you to remember that sometimes we get stuck in our offices and we may not be able to see our kids and our families the way that we should. Make opportunities where you're out working with your families. We offer, the way that we do it is we offer after school homework lab on Mondays for 2 hours every Monday. And every Wednesday, we go out to Payson and make that possible. We also offer Native American youth clubs in all of the middle schools, the junior highs, and the high schools, where we talk to them and visit with them and update them on their grades and any offer assistance if they need, and they're just to listen to them. We also on Mondays offer a regalia making class where the parents come in, the aunties, the grandmas come in to work on outfits from 10 to 2 in our classroom. That's how we do it down here. The more one on one interaction that you can do with your precious students, those are our future tribal leaders. They're the ones that are going to become doctors taking care of you. They're the ones that are going to be there, and you're going to hear them speaking in the community, and they will be able to make you proud. I'm fortunate enough that I've been in this job almost 30 years and have had that opportunity to see the students that started with me as leaders out in my community. And that is so heartwarming. It really makes you so happy when you see how strong, how powerful, and how skilled they are in being able to carry whatever their passion is, their work forward, something constructive. So I just wanted to leave you that every morning I go out and I offer a prayer. A Tchadadin prayer with corn pollen. It's good. My mom always said the most important things that you should always have characteristics is humility and gratitude. You should always have those two. Those two characteristics will keep you in line. And I've never forgotten that. And it's a struggle every day trying to keep your hujal. Hujal means your balance, peace, tranquility, balance, order, happiness. Trying to keep your balance in the world that we live in is a struggle. Some days are harder. Some days run really smooth. You learn more from the harder days than you do from the easy days. And our playing field in Indian education is not a level playing field compared to dominant society. Our playing field for the Lagana people, the playing field is like this. For us, the playing field has always been sloped. It's an uphill battle. We need to recognize that and accept it and try to do it, uh, try to level that out as much as you can for your children, the youth, and everything so that it's not as hard for them. And I think really that's all that I want to say is I know we're going through hard times and our prayers are a lot for states back east that are suffering a lot of raids right now. You see a lot of protesting going on, and our prayers are with them. And in our own unique way, we can fight that as well. We should be vocalizing our um, our views. The more we vocalize, the better circumstances will become for our children. Be bold. Be out there, because you can't do it just sitting back and taking it easy. So I think that's about it. Thank you, Dr. Foster, for uh, asking me to do the prayer. I'm always thankful for prayers, and that I have the Holy Ones to help guide and teach me, and the sacred elements out there that are so consistent and in order to use as an example. So have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very, very appropriate. So let's move on. We have another person that's coming on board with the Tooele School Districts. That is Sienna Begain. I see her here. Could you introduce yourself and little bit about your background, and so we will have an idea of who you are, and we'll go from there.
Yes, my name is Sina Bigay, and it's my pleasure to meet you all here. And um, I'm Navajo, Yate Abene, She'e Sina Bigay Shia, Katnessa Nishle, Dasha Bashichi, Makayan Edashe, Tkamba Dashanella. In the Twin Nest is Nasha. And I'm originally from Arizona. I lived on the Navajo Nation. I was born and raised there. Um, and I moved to Utah in 2016. And I've been living here since. Um, I'm currently the newly Title Six American Indian Program Education Program liaison here in Tooele County. And I am on training at this time, and I am looking forward to meeting the parents and children in our county.
Hey, thank you, Sienna. You know, you have all these Title VI coordinators, and I'll send you some information as far as their contact information. I'll send that to you, and this is a wealth of information that you could get some recommendations, some suggestions, some ideas. These guys, the coordinators are very, very, they're outstanding people. So thank you. So let's move on. Dusty, uh, I know you're
Hello.
okay. Let me take my screen off and give you
Right.
the opportunity to give us our professional development this morning. And I thank
Awesome.
you for that. You know, you you you're very, very knowledgeable, smart, wisdom, full of wisdom and knowledge. You know? So
E. Well
okay,
then.
I'll give you the floor now before I just ramble on after that.
Well then, before I move forward, let me apologize for not, I'm sure there's members of the Northwestern band that know this history a lot better than me, but I thought it would be appropriate because we're coming up on the anniversary of the Bear River massacre that took place up north, and it involves one of the tribes that are found here in Utah, the Northwestern Band, Shoshone, and it's a really rough history. But I think if you all have the opportunity to go up, usually every year they have a remembrance, and you can go up, and the tribal leaders and some of the elders will speak on the massacre. They'll recount the events that took place, and offer a prayer. And sometimes, if the wet weather permits, they feed everyone that's there. I would say, if you can, when you find out the date this year, um, if you do go up, to dress very warm. It's outside, and and it's a rough one, I'll tell you right there. My brother and I went up, and my feet froze, man. But it's worth going to, and it's worth participating in, and learning about, and it's something that you can share with your children. And if you have administrators that are new to this area, you should also,
like everyone's not
encourage them
picturing
to be a part of
themselves
this.
like
If your
the
mic's on, I'd appreciate if you
listeners.
turn your mic off.
How do
That'd
I
help us out a little bit. Um, I so we'll just get started. Not and what I'm not going to give you a really detailed view of this, but I will try to provide as much information as I can about what happened. If you go up there right now, this they have a marker. This marker here it's just off the side of the road. You can drive up just outside of Preston. You can drive up, and this is where they have been having the remembrance, and where they'll set up a stage, just a little just to the side of this marker here, and they'll set out chairs, and you can listen to the speakers, and they'll go through everything. And if you haven't heard Darren Perry talk about this, um, you're just it's really good. They have these markers all the way around, the site that have all this information, and I swear Darren memorized every single placard out there, and he can just look at you and talk, and then quote off these things pretty easy. But it happened back on January 29, 1863, when the U.S. military came up north, and to meet with the Northwestern band, and it wasn't really with good intentions when they did it, and it turned into just honestly a horrific event for the tribe involved, and it's carried, the ramifications of this have carried forward until today. And so I think it's really good to understand more about. Let me see if I can do this. What led up to it? Well, I mean, you're gonna meet a lot of people that have a lot of different ideas about what started it. Um, I, I've looked up a few things from different accounts, and there's at least three things that people may contribute to it. It may not be just any one thing, but maybe a lot of things that taken together um, really kicked off the event in the first place. The first thing that people bring up is that they say that the Shoshone had stole some horses and some cattle belonging to some non-Indian settlers up there. Um, they said they involved people named One-Eyed Tom, another person they called Chipmunk, and another one named Lean Antelope. The second one says that there were some miners and some Shoshones got into a fight, where the miners were killed. Um, but these people weren't from the Northwestern Band, the Sagwich's people. They were from Pocatello's band, and they had taken those horses and maybe some cattle. The people that were killed were George Clayton, Henry Bean, and John Henry. When they notified Colonel Connor, and I'm sorry for that misspell, it's Connor, um, he got Chief Justice John Kinney to issue a warrant for Bear Hunter, Sagwitch, and Sand Pitch, who were part of today's Northwestern Band, even though that these things didn't even take place with the Northwestern Band. It was with Pocatello's group. Another another group will say that this was another contributing factor to this event, was also a fight between non-Indian youth and Shoshone youth, where two non-Indians and two Shoshone were killed. And so, if you read these as a whole, you can see that, the relationships probably weren't the best between the Shoshone tribe and the non-Indians that have moved into the area. And sometimes when that happens, a bunch of little things can tip the scales to things that didn't need to happen in the first place. I did find this picture of Sagwitch and his wife. So that's neat to see that there's photos out there. You can also find photos of other people involved. I was having trouble finding other photos of, or at least prominent members of the Northwestern band at the time. But this is Sagwich and his wife, and he was chief at the time of the massacre on January 29. And I know I say this a lot, um, but I I always quote, Wilma Mankiller when she says public perception creates public policy, right? How you see people and how it really determines how you treat them. If you see someone as violent, you're going to treat them like they're violent. If you see someone as scary, you're going to treat them like they're scary. And opposite, if you see someone as peaceful, you're going to treat them like they're peaceful. Well, the views of the Shoshone at this time were very harsh. They're some of the things that I picked up off my reading. They were being called like stealing or thieving savages. They were called beggars. Um, and because of that, they probably were a little defensive and a little bitter of their land being taken from them, because they were quite honestly running out of places to live, and they were getting pushed into smaller and smaller acreages of where all their people could be. In fact, when the Mormon pioneers came into this area, the Shoshone people went out to meet them because they saw that they were farming, they were starting to build, and the Shoshone were like, it looks like you're going to be here. Looks like you're staying. Well, we're staying here too because this is where our people are from, and they gave opportunity to the LDS Church to purchase that land. And the LDS Church straight up told them that, this land wasn't the Shoshones to sell, that it was their land, that God had preserved it for them, and that it was for them to have. And, they said the Shoshone didn't have a right to sell the the Mormon inheritance that they received from God. And so this was already causing a little bit of problems just with land. And as more and more pioneers and settlers came into these areas, less and less land became available to the tribes themselves, who kept backing off as more and more non-Indians encroached. Um, on January 27 of 1863, one of their spiritual leaders of the tribe, he had a dream that his people were being killed by American soldiers, and he tried to talk to the leadership. He talked to a lot of the village and told them, hey, we need to get out of here because this is a dream that I had, and I think we're going to be hurt, and and it might be hard for us, so we need to leave. But the leadership, was like, well, we haven't really done anything wrong, when we haven't, nothing that the other side hasn't done, and maybe this is just a peace talk. Maybe this is just us, working things out and setting up new agreements. And so Tyndall was able to get some families to leave with him, but a lot of them stayed with the tribe. Right, I think there's a warm springs or a hot springs up there. There's fresh water, and this is a place where their people have always been to, and it's a really pretty valley. And I have some photos that I added to this slide deck that you can see too. So even though Tyndall had asked his people to go with him, the leadership had decided to stay, hoping to talk and have peace talks with any soldiers that may be coming in the next few days. Um, a non-Indian friend also rode up to the tribe, and he told the Shoshone that Colonel Connor was coming, and he was stationed out in like the Salt Lake Valley area, and that he didn't have very good feelings towards. Honestly, he didn't have very good feelings towards the Mormon Church. He had encountered them in Missouri. He wasn't in agreement with their lifestyle, but he also didn't have a lot of good feelings towards Native people either. He saw them as a hindrance to progression, and it was when he decided to come out towards Bear River, he had in his mind that he was going to go out there and take people out. And and though the tribes were warned, that Connor was coming, they didn't really prepare for war there. Again, they thought this was just, well, there's stories about things going down. We're going to talk them out, and we're going to come to some agreement. So, the tribe was getting ready to negotiate and handle things on that level. Um, Patrick E. Connor. This is Colonel Connor, that led the military on that day. I think there's still a statue of him, just on the hill east of University of Utah campus. They have a statue of him up there. He's originally from Ireland. He came to the United States when he was 12, and when he was old enough, he quickly joined the U.S. military. He changed his last name from O'Connor to just Connor, took off the O. You remember a lot of people, a lot of immigrants coming off the boats that were not being treated very, very well either, and so a lot of them were Irish. And so that, and they were, and they were seen as, the Irish Catholics were seen as in a good light back in that time. So I think he and a lot of other people, changed their names, made small changes so that they could operate and without having that prejudice on them. But he was a pretty hard man. He was a lifetime military, and he really wanted to be out west because he was really intrigued by the gold rush and things. In fact, when he was stationed out in Utah, he would encourage people to come to this valley and start mining and continue on to California. Whereas the LDS Church was, at the same time, was really discouraging people from coming into Utah territory. They didn't want non-members or non-Mormons moving in here and contaminating their areas, right? What they were thinking. But Connor, just, he was doing the opposite. He was encouraging more non-Mormons or non-LDS church people to come to these valleys and start mining and build it up as a stop for people that were going into California for gold. But this is a picture of him. I couldn't find that statue of him, a good picture of that online, so I just included this one that they had, that's available. Um, on January 29, 1863, um, if you read Darren Perry's accounts from multiple different places where he was recorded or wrote, he talked about how Chief Sagwitch would wake up early every morning, and he woke his people up, and because they knew the soldiers were coming. In fact, they said that prior to the soldiers even being in sight, they could see the steam coming off the animals and the soldiers because it was so cold that day. And as that mist broke, they could see soldiers coming up there, so they saw it happening. And there were some Shoshone that were unsure about what was going to happen, so they did grab a few of their bows and weapons to meet the soldiers coming up. But again, the Sagwich's plan was to negotiate with the arriving soldiers and see what would happen. He even told his people and advised them, "Hey, we're not attacking. This is about talking and working things out." But because of their experience with non-Indians in the area, they still were trying to be ready. They weren't saying anything was going to happen, but they were going to stay ready just in case these things happen. So they did come and meet the soldiers, and a lot of the men were carrying their bows and other weapons that they had. But we don't know how it started or who shot first, but it a fight broke out, and this battle broke out, and because they weren't prepared for it and prepared to defend themselves, people just start scattering and going to all different places. And even the accounts say that the native men, to protect themselves and to try to fight back, they were using holes, or foxholes people call them, that children made, that they would play in so they could help themselves. I think I mentioned earlier that Colonel Connors, his view is that that all Indians were perpetrators. It didn't matter if there was just one or two, natives from a group. If that group did, if anybody from that group did something, the entire group was guilty by association. And he didn't limit that to men. He included women and children, and he's quoted as he's told his people that don't you don't have mercy on children. You can kill the children too, because he used to say nits make lice, right? He used to say they're going to grow up into something bad. So he didn't see anything wrong with killing native children because he didn't want them to grow up to be native adults. In fact, um, so in this fighting, before any words were spoken, they started fighting, and the Shoshone didn't do very well because they had bows and arrows and tomahawks and things, but the soldiers had modern weapons. They had rifles, and it wasn't a very balanced fight that ended up taking place. And this is a blurry picture of a painting that's available, and you can see these depictions. I think they have them at the BYU library, documented, and they might have them at different museums that from the same artist that he depicts some of the things that were happening at that time. Um, I won't spend a lot of time on that photo, but I just want to let you know that this is something that people know about, and people still create writing or art or of the event that took place. And the event itself was pretty violent. They had them right next to the river, and people tried really hard to get out and escape. And there's a few things that describe how different people were able to get away. There's Ray Diamond, who was Sagwich's nephew, who escaped. He said he had to swim across that river, and he hid in the hills. And he lived to be 100 years old. So this took place in 1863. He didn't pass until 1963, which is just shoot, that's just 14 years before I was born. And so a lot of people will be like, well, if this happened so long ago, how do we know so much about, from the native perspective, what took place that day? Well, a lot of these people, there were survivors there, and a lot of them lived to be pretty old, and they passed these stories on to their relatives and to people that were willing to listen. Um, these accounts talk about women swimming across rivers with children on their backs, and how most of them died in that river because you're not moving very fast in that river, and people were shooting at you. Um, there another a woman on sea. She jumped in the river and hid under the banks and the vegetation that grew along the shores of that river, and she ended up losing her child in that river as they hid from soldiers. There's another talk of a man that swam across that river trying to get away, and he had a buffalo robe on his back, and he was able to make it. Um, Chief Sagwitch himself, he escapes on horseback. They said he was being shot at and attacked when he was leaving, but the only wound he received was a bad wound to his hand, and he actually had two horses shot out from under him as he was trying to escape. And finally, when Sagwitch was able to get on a horse to take off, another man, trying to leave with him, he grabbed the tail of that horse that Sagwitch was on, so he could run and kind of be pulled out of there faster than he could go on his own. Another chief that was there was Chief Bear Hunter, and he was caught and tortured. They tried to get information out of him and tried to get him to say things. And um, there's some accounts where they've shot him, they stabbed him, they kicked him, they beat him, and he was just keeping his mouth closed. He wouldn't say anything to them. And that the soldiers became so upset that one of the soldiers took his bayonet, his knife that you attach to your rifle. He took that bayonet off his rifle and heated up in the fire until it was glowing red. And he put it through one side of Bear Hunter's ear all the way through his head to the other ear. And people were watching this, as they hid in the on the hillside or by the river. They were seeing all these things take place. So it was a very violent event. Jaeger Timbumbu, Sagwich's son, and his grandmother, they played dead in the snow. He said he was only 15 years old at the time, and that, one second, please. One, and he, Jaeger Timbumbu, Sagwich's son, he was able to survive. And he talked about how him and his grandma were just laying there. And he said a soldier actually noticed that he wasn't dead, and but he didn't. He let him live. He just walked by him, and 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 some accounts say that, well, he fooled him. He actually believed he was dead, and some will say, he at least one soldier, had some mercy upon the things that were going on that day. Sokwich was the oldest son of Sagwich. He also made it out. His girlfriend was riding behind him, and she was actually shot and killed as they tried to escape. And after he got a safe distance away, he found cover, and he also watched the attack happening. In the end, a lot of the military called this the Battle of Bear River. Like it was a planned battle where two sides came out prepared, ready to fight. The Shoshone maintain again that that's not what they thought was going to happen. They thought it was a negotiation, so they weren't ready for that attack, and they weren't ready to have any type of battle there. For the military, the 14 soldiers ended up being killed that day. With another 4 soldiers died after. The military said that the fight lasted about 4 hours. The Shoshone say it lasted almost the entire day, and that because maybe the fighting itself maybe lasted 4 hours, but for sure the soldiers spent the rest of the day burning everything. They burned all their lodges, they burned all their tools, they burned all their any weapons or bows they could use for survival. A lot of the soldiers grabbed anything that was valuable and took it with them so that they could sell it when they could get back to where they were staying. But that entire village was burned to the ground after that. When the Shoshone returned to the campsite, they found all their relatives that had been killed. Sagwich found his wife. He did find an infant daughter alive. Because they had absolutely nothing. He was pretty sure that they were all going to freeze or starve to death because everything was taken. He had put his baby in a cradle board and hung it to a tree, hoping that someone would find her and take care of her and keep her alive, because he was fairly positive that all of them were going to die. And I think some of the writings that you'll find describe Sagwich as being in shock after all this happened. And they moved all their dead bodies and put them into the river as a type of water burial. Another son of Sagwich, who was Bishop, he was 6 years old, and he as a 6-year-old, he watched all this happening and seeing all that happen. I think about, Eileen's sharing the things happening in the east coast of the U.S. Sometimes you'll see stories of that too, where the government will come in and remove adults and leave children by themselves. This woman was pulled out of her car and hauled away, and the people went to her car and they saw a baby in the car seat still. And you can see interviews right now of kids coming home and one parent telling their child that their other parent has been picked up by the government, and that can really cause some damage. And you think about these kids that were here in this village that were killed or watched their parents die, their grandparents die, watched their friends die, and they survive, and they have to live with that type of shock from the event. After the attack, some of the Shoshone split off into to live with other bands. Um, and they heard pretty quickly, those other Shoshone bands, what happened to Sagwich's people. Um, and they were in mourning. And some of the reading you'll find there was a woman named Poby Hub and her friends. Some tribes they'll cut their hair. They'll cut their hair as a time of mourning. They'll cut their arms. They'll cut their legs, make themselves bleed as a physical manifestation of their mourning, right? And you'll see this practiced by a lot of different tribes that do this. Um, Sagwitch, even though his group weren't the ones that had stolen those animals that were probably part of the reason why the military came up. Those were Pocatello's people that had stolen those things. He sent men up there to get those stolen animals, and he returned them. Sagwitch actually got those animals back and returned them to the people that they were taken from. Um, and that's a powerful fact to see, right? Even though that he was attacked, even though his people were massacred, even though he was, they were treated that way, he still found it, you know, within him to try to make things right, to set things in balance, to put things back to where they should be, so that these things didn't continue to happen. But the Shoshones, they didn't have anything after this. Like I said earlier, if it wasn't burned, it was taken, and so they were left pretty destitute at this point, and their odds of survival didn't seem very good to them at this time. Some of the survivors that we can find out that made it through this, Chief Sagwitch, Soquitch, and Jaeger Timbambu, they made it. Ray Diamond, Peter Ottergary, Hiram Wogasaw, Frank Timbambu Warner, they all survived. Tindup and his family, Biawutsi, Tawenge Timbambu, Onzi Chi, uh, Hicham Deki, and Mojogwich. And there was other survivors that made it, but they left. They didn't want to be in this area anymore. And so they left to live with other people and other bands of Shoshone. But because of these people survived, because they were able to share their story, we can share this today with you, and we can learn from these things about that relationship and what kind of people they were. And so we have to hold them in reverence, because they made a point to make sure we knew that these things happened and how these things happened. Um, that massacre was so detrimental that the Shoshone never, and the settlers of the Mormon settlers in those areas, they never, that ended that conflict. Um, but because there were so many less native people there, the Shoshone lost their people, they lost even more land, and more land opened up, um, to non-Indian settlement and farming, because nearly the entire northwestern Shoshone were killed in that. Estimates from 350 to 500 people, um, 350 to 500 Shoshone were killed at that time, and very few remained left to move forward and carry on. Trying to find help, Sagwitch is told by other non-Indians in the area that they should look to the LDS Church for help. And while Sagwitch goes to make that plea for assistance, his son is sold, Bishop. He's sold to a Mormon family. Again, because they didn't have anything, right? They didn't have food, they didn't have homes, they didn't have, it was so early in the morning, what clothing they had was probably limited. So his son was sold to a Mormon family. It says, for a quilt, a bag of beans, a sheep, and a sack of flour. You have to think about how hard must your situation be if you're willing to do that. If you're willing to save your son to do that, and how much need your people had to survive if they're willing to do that, right? But he ends up uh, surviving, and that was the main purpose, was for Bishop to survive. And they ended up changing his name to Frank Warner, and he has a pretty successful life, after this, considering what he had been through. He ends up graduating from Brigham Young Academy. He ends up teaching reading and writing to other Native people. He ends up fully converting to the LDS church and served two LDS missions. And from what we can tell and from the comments made by Northwestern Band leadership, they're very proud of Frank Warner and who he became. Um, Proud of Bishop for his accomplishments and for continuing to live and carry on a good legacy, that his tribe could be proud of. Uh, with so much loss of their traditional lands, the Shoshone had a hard time making it anywhere. They had to rebuild. You had to rebuild your homes. You had to rebuild your tools so you can go hunt and gather and take care of your people. And all the land that they were used is not being occupied by settler pioneers, right? And the and so the Shoshone, they begin to work as laborers for different non-Indian families. They work on farms, they work in ranches, they end up working in carpentry, blacksmithing, um, and though they were promised a reservation through the Fort Bridger Treaty, to this day, the Northwestern Band Shoshone are without a reservation. They are without land. They do have some private land that they hold, but the Shoshone government today is still functioning, and they're headquartered in Ogden, Utah, and they're making efforts to secure a reservation for their people, and trying to negotiate with the federal government to see how that will work. And so we're the state of Utah, would like to see that happen. Also, they'd like to see the Shoshone get some land. There's two tribes in Utah that are landless right now. The Northwestern Band Shoshone and the San Juan Southern Paiute down on the Utah-Arizona border. And so working to help and assist them in gaining that land, especially Northwestern Band after that loss. And then on top of that, being promised land through a treaty, and it's still not happening. We're hoping that we can help them um, acquire those lands for their people, and so that they can take care of those resting places for their ancestors that had passed, and so they can preserve that history and move forward and continue to thrive. Northwestern Band is doing very well. They have very good leadership and really good people to work with. After the after the massacre, a lot of them, if not all, of Savitch's band, they go in and convert to Mormonism. They move up to Corinne, 75, and then Washakie Farm from 76 to the 1880s. They open a school. Um, when World War II starts, those are employment opportunities for a lot of Native people. So a lot of Shoshone joined the military, or they went to work in factories that were producing goods for the military, right? Like industrial factories that help build planes or build tanks, or even put together weapons. They went to work for the U.S. military, and they had to leave Utah to do that. And also, you remember too that there's, today we have three big bands of Shoshone in Fort Hall, Fort Washakie, and with the Northwestern Band, and they're all related. And their membership would, in the summertime especially, would visit different bands and take part of their celebrations. In the 1960s, a lot of them returned home to Washakie, only to find their homes burned and their things taken, because the LDS Church had thought that everything was abandoned, and so they decided to reclaim all those things that they had given to the Northwestern Band of Shoshone. Um, and after a long time, they of talks and discussion of that horrible mistake, the church, was able to give the Shoshone Band 184 acres, and I think they still hold those 184 today. And I think that includes parts of their cemetery and other areas that they traditionally held as homeland. Like I said, I guess I blew up this picture too much and made it blurry, but the road is right where my, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but it's right behind these cars. Preston's over here on the left, but every year the tribe will set up a remembrance, and they'll speak, and people will come and rehear what had happened, what took place there, and why it's important. It probably didn't happen right here at this spot. The river is kind of back here, and across the road, you go past this hill. There's another mesa back here that overlooks the river, and that's where the Shoshone tribe says this all took place is further back here. But being next to the road, they put this monument so people could see it and read about it. And some it started off, there's plaques that are stuck to this monument, and some of them are pretty biased about what happened. You know, the daughters of the pioneers put up a plaque on that thing, and it wasn't very fair, the language that was used in it, and they have since replaced that plaque with a new one that is more neutral and better describes the event that may have taken place, and that was done in 2000. I want to say 2018 or 2020 when they made that correction to those plaques. But you can come up here, and sometimes they'll, like I said, if weather permitting, they'll feed all those that come if you want. Um, Rios Pacheco, and he does a prayer and a blessing too there, and you can, and it's good feelings if you're there. But you know, when I went, this whole area was covered in snow, and it was really cold. And I think snow or not, it's still pretty cold. But if I can find the dates, I'll try to get them posted on the Indian Affairs website or share them with Chuck. So if you or your students or families would like to attend that remembrance, you'd be able to do it. They're doing a lot of cleanup right now along the area. There are a lot of projects where people will come in and help free up that water from their Bear River. They're hoping to restore it to its natural um, its natural look. They had planted the farmers and people, they planted a lot of what they call Russian olive trees along the rivers, hoping to stop the shores or the banks of the rivers from eroding. But those we find out that those Russian olive trees take a lot of water. Each tree takes 75 to 100 gallons of water per day. That's one tree. And so they have these huge projects of removing all these Russian olive trees to free up that water and help feed the Great Salt Lake to keep that healthy so that doesn't dry up, and all of those poisonous dust and powders from the bottom of that lake bed don't go into the air and hurt people. So they're trying to open up their river and work with the state of Utah to to heal the Great Salt Lake. They've had different versions of an interpretive center to be built down in that area too. Something that gives the history of the Northwestern Band, that gives a history of the things that happened to them, who they are, and to build bridges of friendship between non-Indians and Indians alike in that area. And so they're still raising money for that. If you go to the Northwestern Band's website, there's links where you can contribute so that they can get these things done. Also contribute to helping projects like this where they can continue working on the land and restoring it to its natural place. Um, Way over here, that's where that I don't know if you guys can see my cursor like moving in a circle along this road here. Over there is where that monument is, where they'll have that remembrance. But if you there's a road that goes all the way on along this, and it comes up on this mesa right here where you can overlook the Bear River Valley. You can see the river that comes through here. And people come here and they'll leave offerings, for those people that passed away and that were killed there, and so when I had an opportunity to go there, I wanted to make sure I brought an offering and tied it to that fence post there. And, and you want to say a prayer, for those people that passed and for the people that still remain, and for their efforts to try to make things better and to make things right. So I encourage you all to attend that if you can. Um, I I I I have a lot of respect for Northwestern Band, Shoshone, for their leadership and for the attitude they have on continuing to move forward and to be strong for their people. It's inspiring, and it's worth learning more about. And it's worth, I mean, if you have the budget or if you can, get the Northwestern Band to have someone come out and speak and share on this. I promise it's 50 times better than what I've done, and it's something that your kids will enjoy, and I think will help educate the communities you work with and the non-Indian communities also that work with your Title VI program. But that's all I have right now. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but otherwise I'll turn time back over to Chet Foster.
Hey, Dustin, that was great, man. There's a lot of history there. The things that pop out to me is the acknowledgement, to understand that the history and make that history well known and to get down to I guess, to the basic of actually what transpired during that time. Because I think that just acknowledge that there was it, it wasn't a, it wasn't a battle, it wasn't a war, it was basically a massacre. And I think just acknowledgement now, they're understanding that we got to make this public to everybody and how both sides feel. And I think that, to erect this site here, that really it shows promise that the two societies can work side by side and do something right. You
Mm.
know.
Yeah,
So with
and
it,
a lot of people they don't understand how natives got into the position they're currently at, right? And they're like, "Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? How come it's like this?" And it's like, let's learn this history. Let's look at the obstacles that were created and that created that created the situation we find a lot of our tribal governments in, and them trying to better that. And it takes a long time,
yeah,
especially when you're working with governments. There's bureaucracy, but there's it's changing hearts as well as minds when you share this history. And so yeah, it's very important to share.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess the next step is that you get these guys who make decisions and putting this history into history books and the geography where it happened and the just some of the basic history of that. I think that's sometimes that's really hard to do. So um, that's great. This is some good history. I learned a lot
Yeah.
today, this morning. Thank you.
Yeah. So you have a hand up to
Yeah.
Dominguez, Argenlivia Dominguez,
Yes,
Argenlivia.
Dusty. I really
I've
enjoyed
learned a
your
lot today as well.
presentation, and I really enjoyed your presentation. It was really good one. Is there any way that you can share?
Just share
Can
the
you hear me?
PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yeah, I can send that to Chuck, and he can send it out to you all.
Yeah, I would like to have that. It's really impressive. And like you mentioned, it's very good to know that it's part of the story and it make it clear exactly what happened in the past. Because through the years, a lot of misunderstanding or misinformation has been lost, and that people sometimes take position that is wrong position when you don't know the story of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and Darren Perry, he wrote a book on the whole thing too. So, and it's a shorter book. I mean, it's not short. It's about a half inch, 3/4 inch wide, but it's definitely worth reading. And I think you can find links to that either on Amazon or on the tribe's website also.
What is
Hey,
the name
hey,
of it?
what's the name of that book?
I think it's just the Bear River Massacre. Hold on, I might have one.
He just wrote another book too, but I think it's the Bear River Massacre.
Yeah, just I'll put his name
Yes.
in the chat, and you can just look for the author and and
Yes,
you'll pull it up.
that should be great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dustin.
Yeah, I think Sienna had a comment.
Hi. Thank you for
Hello.
sharing that. I got a little teary. Um, the part where uh the mother was hiding with her child in the river. Um, I think it's I think you should have some resources, find resources. Um, I think the book is the best way that helps with those resources too. But thank you for sharing that. And I did not know that happened as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of the largest massacres in U.S. history too, and that took place up here. But yeah, January 29, if you want to look online, if you want to attend any remembrance events by the tribe, I'd encourage all of you to go. It's good. It's a good experience. All right. Thanks, Chuck.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time around.
Next month, yeah. I got my
We'll-
second shingle shot, so it's starting to kick in. So, so I'm gonna roll over here somewhere. Oh, thank you, Eileen. All right, we'll see you all. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you. Okay, let's move on. Updates with Title VI programs. Let me just start by saying that, being apologizing for the late STPD funding for your sites. It took a toll on me too. But now all that funding now is at your business office and your school districts. And you guys ought to see what's available, um, and get that application submitted as soon as you can. Um, I have a running log of who submitted and their application for funding. So I think
Dr. Foster.
yes,
I just wanted to encourage the coordinators to please put in their input as to how that funding should be used. When
yeah,
the district gets that, write a narrative of how you need that funding used. And Dr. Foster sends out the form that tells how, the do's and don'ts of what you can spend the funding on. Make sure you send that in with your narrative. And if you need like professional development, if be very specific. That ways you know that the funding is going to the program services that you need. So make sure you follow up on that and have a narrative and a budget where you are able to distribute the funding wisely and efficiently. So that's all my recommendation would be. I have a really good district that really helps in being able to follow through on our recommendations as to how that funding goes to which accounts and all, but follow up on that.
yeah. That's a very, very good point. I think some of you don't have that opportunity, but I think uh, you get your vision as to how that money is going to be spent and where that funding should go. But I think oftentimes that because it's an administration, oftentimes that they think for you. I think now it's a good time that you like to see some of the your programs flourish in terms of where that funding would go. And I think Eileen made a very, very good point with that. And I do have a running log as to what where that funding what the funding is going. So, we can do that privately, so, but you guys have that, you guys have that, funding out there in your school districts now. And just kind of think about, where and how and what programs and where this, funding should go. Okay. But anyway, that's the STPD. And then, from that set aside for your, senior celebration. Um, Again, the memo that I'm going to write to the administration. I think in the past we've asked for $900 to be set aside, and, using that $900 to provide meals for your celebration. So, within the next month or so, well, at least next month, I should have that, decision made from the administration. So, that set aside, just kind of think about that piece there. Um, and, the third thing is that I plan to come and visit, your schools, and, to look into the, 506 forms, and, you know to make sure that that's all accountable, and just kind of be aware that I'm not so sure when you guys are going to receive that announcement that your, application for that 506 form and the OIE funding is, you're gonna they're gonna ask you if you like to apply for that, and of course it's yes. So, I don't know exactly when that's going to come. I don't have privy to that kind of information, but I think you guys do when they send the information to you guys straight to your school districts. Just kind of be aware of that. And then, the fourth thing is that the probably the last item now, this is what I'm going to start to talk about each time we meet, is the tribal consultation. Again, we're going to follow the same protocol as last year. But if you like to change your protocol as far as meeting with a tribe, let me know. Um, and I think this tribal consultation, it fits within the bounds of the OIE guidelines and policy. Again, any school district that receives more than, $40,000 from the Office of Indian Education, uh, an OIE, or, tribal consultation has to be, planned, and, has we have to follow through on that. But I'll start to put that information together, and once we get that information, we'll get the dates and the time that, is allowed for us, for those, school districts that are away from the valley here. I don't know, last year you guys made your own plans, but if you decide, to have me make those plans for you, I'll be more than happy to do that. So those are, but for the next time, the next 2, 3 meetings, I'll be talking about that tribal consultation stuff. So that's the updates from my office. And, are there any updates with your Title VI folks? And
Dr.
again,
Foster,
oh yes, go ahead.
I have one question. I'm getting a lot of questions from um, former Navajo language students that are missing credits from last year.
Yeah.
That took Navajo language and Navajo government independently. They didn't let me know that they were taking Navajo language, and so they did it independently. And um, I'm wondering who the person was that was taking care of that at Granite. That Mr. Long sent the information to.
Yeah. Is Granite here? Is, Samantha? Is she on the call here?
I have that same question also. One of my students didn't get receive credit.
Okay. Now let's put this thing together. Let's do our part. Our part would be that if we get a name and the year in which they took the class and the school,
Okay.
if you guys could give me that information, I can follow through on this information with Samantha from the Granite School District because I think this is important. You know, that's credit hours, and they had a lot of seat time, and they've taken the exam, and they did all the work to receive that grade. So if
Yeah.
anybody out there still doesn't have their students receiving their grade, let me know. Again, the name, the year, and the school in which they were from.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we need to think about going forward.
Uh, did we lose her?
Yeah, I think the announcements is going on. That's why.
Oh, that's probably me. Sorry.
I I think one of the things that we need to think about going forward is the Title VI coordinator needs to be informed when students are taking the class. I had a lot of students that didn't tell me that they were taking the class. They did it
Oh yeah.
independently and they didn't follow through on their pass offs. So, going forward, it would be a good idea for all of us coordinators to make sure that we say at the beginning of the year, you have to get a hold of us and we are available to help you do pass offs because that's a huge help to talk to Clayton. And a lot of my students even didn't do that. So just that was just an observation I made.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, is there any other?
I have a question, Dr. Foster.
Okay.
On the STDP funding, we got the one. Is the second one available already too?
Yeah,
Or is it
both of them
coming
are.
later? Oh, okay.
Actually, they all the STPD funding is all available now.
So we just have to write for it.
Right.
Awesome.
Like in your case, I think
I think they did the one, but not the
they
other.
did. Yeah, you got to get both of them.
Okay. I just want to make sure so I can get it on my end.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? Okay. The Urban Indian Center. Is there anyone from the Urban Indian Center that could give us an update on this? On what's going on with their center? I guess they're all busy. Okay. Well, let's adjourn now since we're through with the meeting here. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for your attendance and your attentiveness. You know, the professional development. It really, it the information was hardening, but I thought that we needed to hear that. You know, I think the history of the American Indian is it's very sometimes it's very difficult to hear in what transpired. But I think today it's getting better. It could be a lot better. You know, I think with the help from the resources that we have for our students, that really makes a big difference. And so I think that what you guys do, again, as I said in the past, that the work that you guys do is really really important. And I think the students as well as the parents, I'm pretty sure that the schools and the teachers really appreciate what you guys do for them because once they're recognized by the schools and the teachers, things begin to flow a lot better. And if they're unknown, you know, I used to call the you know in a silent society because sometimes they never, they never said anything, or they never were recognized for what they do in schools. Okay. With that, we have our next meeting on February the 13th. And I appreciate you guys coming. And if there's anybody who would like to talk privately, you can stay on. I'll stay on until everybody leaves. Other than that, you guys have a good day, and thanks for your attendance.
Thanks, Dr. Foster.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Foster. This is Thomasia. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I could not hear you earlier. I was on my laptop and it wouldn't let me. I don't know what was wrong with it. But anyways, I have two questions. With the funding